It's Ruth Basinski here. We've now completed the 2011 series on the new brain science. Each Wednesday night, a gathering of thousands of practitioners have convened to listen together to groundbreaking calls on the new brain science and how it's changing our work. Practitioners linked in from as far away as China, Japan, Egypt, and Australia to all throughout Europe, Central and South America, and every state in the United States of America. So exactly where has our journey taken us these past 6 weeks? Let's just look at the highlights. We began with Norman Doidge, the physician who wrote The Brain That Changes Itself. As you might recall, this was the book that really brought neuroplasticity to the forefront. In that first call, Norman set the stage for the entire series by sharing the story of some of the earliest discoveries that gave birth to what we now call the science of neuroplasticity. We talked specifically about neuroplastic approaches with children who have learning disorders. Some of these were high-tech and some were radically different from conventional thinking. But that research has now led scientists to even more new work with children with autism. We also looked at the aging brain and how people who have suffered what in the past might have been seen as irreparable damage from stroke now have reason for new hope. We built on those ideas in the next session with Dan Siegel, a physician and professor at UCLA Medical School and author of numerous books on parenting, child development, and the brain. In this call, we focused on the world of interpersonal neurobiology. Here we looked at how relationships influence the developing brain. We saw why humiliation and shame can be so toxic to the developing mind, and how we might use neuroplasticity to redevelop damaged brain circuits. In this session, Dan describes 6 features that promote neuroplasticity. From there, we went into how to guide self-directed neuroplasticity with Rick Hansen, a psychologist and author of Buddha's Brain. We learned how to help our patients adjust for the brain's negativity bias and why, with just that understanding, we can use neuroplasticity to create a life-changing shift. For evolutionary reasons, this bias toward the negativity is hardwired in our brains, and it affects life in so many ways. Specifically, we saw how it might be impacting our recovery from chronic pain and even panic attack. We saw why it's important to educate people about the power of neuroplasticity and what a significant motivator that can be, especially with teenagers and men. And we looked at the anatomy of the traumatized brain and how stress releases cortisol, which ends up sensitizing the amygdala, which now makes us more reactive to stress tomorrow. This chain of events results in weakening the hippocampus, which makes it much less able to aid in counteracting the impact of the trauma. But we also saw why mindfulness can help maintain the brain's well-being. We then launched into one of my personal favorites, not so much because I love to exercise, I don't, but because this session gave me renewed motivation for why exercise needs to be a regular part of life. Dr. John Ratey, a physician, author, and Harvard professor, confirmed that not only are there cardiovascular and weight management benefits to exercise, but probably even more revolutionary is the effect that exercise has on the brain. As we delved into why and how exercise can change the brain, we talked very specifically about BDNF, what John calls miracle grow for the brain. And from there, the implications got pretty exciting. We looked at the role of exercise in preventing cognitive decline, the impact of exercise on learning, and the use of exercise as an alternative to drugs in treating depression. Finally, we talked about how some high-intensity interval training releases a sort of metabolic cleanup crew, and why that might be particularly useful for folks who are already physically fit. And if you have patients who are baby boomers, all of what John talked about can be especially reassuring. That makes a great lead-in to our next speaker, Dr. John Arden. Ever since brain science has been on the radar screen, We've talked a lot about the idea of rewiring the brain, but John took us a step further into what brain-based therapy might actually look like. This is particularly important for practitioners, but also for teachers and parents and anyone really who wants a better brain. Neuroplasticity can bring profound changes to our patients if we know how to introduce brain-based treatments into our practice. Finally, we wrapped up our main series with what some might consider the frontier of neurobiology. I'm referring to the field of epigenetics, and for that, we went to Dr. Bruce Lipton, a longtime pioneer. I'm going to predict that if you spend any time studying epigenetics, it will change the way you look at healing. For so long, we've thought of genes as controlling outcomes simply by turning on and off. But the latest research presents a radically different way of understanding these processes and the impact that genes may, but don't always, have. We just scratched the surface of this new field in that call, but I really wanted to introduce you to this topic because you'll be hearing a lot more about epigenetics in the next 5 years. Now, if you missed any of the sessions in this series, or if you want to hear them again and get the transcripts so that you can start implementing these ideas, just register for a gold subscription. And I'm excited to tell you that when you do, you'll also get 3 bonus sessions. First, we'll have an interview with Dan Amen, a physician and author of numerous books on the brain. Here we'll focus on the brain-body connection, why changing your weight changes your brain. And we'll talk about applying neuroplasticity to specific populations. Dan will tell us about an exciting pilot project he is doing with retired NFL players and the impact that is having on them and their families. We'll get into even more practical applications when Dan shares a program he's created for a megachurch in California. Now, to introduce our second bonus call, let me say that most of us often think about memory loss as the first symptom of Alzheimer's disease. But there's another symptom of the dementing process that is often completely overlooked that could occur even before or along with the loss of memory for a substantial number of patients. That will be the focus of our second call with Dr. Elkanan Goldberg. And in our final bonus call, we'll devote a whole session to the brain-belly connection, and specifically how the brain is affected by the food that we eat. We'll talk with Larry McCleary, a neurosurgeon and author of Feed Your Brain, Lose Your Belly. In this interview, we'll hear about his notion that we have an epidemic of brain starvation and why it's important to take a metabolic approach to brain health. Larry will suggest strategies to help nourish the brain while also losing weight. Thank you for being a part of our community on these calls. Each week, the comment boards were brimming with responses from practitioners describing how they were going to implement the ideas. If you haven't seen them yet, you can still check them out at nicabm.com/comments. You'll find a lot to chew on there. If you missed any of the sessions in the series, or if you want to hear them again, just click on the order button right below. That will sign you up for a gold subscription to give you instant access to all of these materials. From there, you'll be able to download your own files of the recordings and print out all of the transcripts. You'll find the order button right below. When you sign up for the gold subscription, you'll get the recordings of each of the 6 sessions in the series, a PDF transcript that you can print out from each of the calls, and the recording and transcripts for each of the bonus calls. You can put your order in today. Now, the price of this invaluable series on the new brain science will be going up midnight Eastern Daylight Time, Monday, May 9th. So be sure to buy it now to receive substantial savings. And as with all of NICABM's products, you are protected with a 30-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So if for any reason you decide that this is not for you, just return the product and you'll get all of your money back. So just place your order on the link below so that you can get in on this lowest price before it goes up midnight, Monday, May 9th.